Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. I'm John Christman. The show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. If you're thinking about starting or enhancing your real estate career, give us a call. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. You can also visit us online at tampaschoolofrealestate.com. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com. And this is our Ask the Instructor show. So every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, we come to you to help you understand the real estate industry, the more technical side of real estate, as well as need-to-know information to pass your real estate exam. So what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with a topic that comes up in pretty much any type of property. And unless it's a brand new property, but even that could have this, it's called depreciation. Depreciation. So depreciation, very simply, is the loss of value. Anytime you're losing value on a property, that's going to be depreciation. Now, there's a few different types of value losses we're going to be talking about here. And depending on what type of value loss it may be, it's going to kind of help us understand whether or not this is something that can be fixed economically. And if it is something that can be fixed economically, we can kind of maybe talk about how much it's going to cost or whether it's even really worth it for the sale. And that's where the real world side of this comes into play here. Because like I said, unless a property is brand new, but even if it is brand new, it could still have some loss of value due to depreciation. Now you might be saying, John, okay, so I understand depreciation. This is maybe something old. Something depreciates in value. It gets old and it's no longer worth as much. That is one type of depreciation, but just one type. There's two other categories we could kind of talk about, but the age is primarily due to physical. So your physical depreciation on a property, this could be a myriad of things. This could be the roof needing to be replaced. Nothing wrong with the roof when it was put in, but it's just an old roof. It's worn out. It's had hailstorms, hail damage, anything like that's due to the age or normal wear and tear, basically, or even if it's not necessarily normal wear and tear, if it's just worn out, that's going to be your physical depreciation. Maybe the lawn has got weeds in it and it's overgrown, or maybe the house needs some paint. That's the type of depreciation most people are familiar with, and that's called physical depreciation. So physical depreciation, this is usually your easiest type of depreciation to fix. This is stuff that's usually pretty easy to fix. Now, a roof, on the other hand, that's not quite so easy to fix. And you know, whether or not that's going to translate to actual increase in value, you got to kind of look at it on a case-by-case basis here. But that's physical depreciation. Now, the type of depreciation we would have, even if this is a brand new property, and it could, because it might not have this, but if we are experiencing the loss of value, maybe due to the way the property is designed or the way it's laid out, maybe there's not enough bathrooms. Maybe there's too many bedrooms or not enough bedrooms. Maybe the kitchen is too small or the kitchen is too big or the kitchen is on one side of the house and the dining room is on another. These are all things that can be part of a brand new property that's decreasing the value, causing a loss in value. But that's not physical. That's going to be called functional. So functional depreciation, this is going to be due to poor layouts. It could also be, let's say, the builder uses some sort of cheap windows. Let's say they're going to use single pane windows or something that isn't a very high quality window. That could be a functional obsolescence. If they're using any sort of inferior materials at all, that's a functional. Chinese drywall, that would be a functional obsolescence, a functional form of depreciation. So with this, and this is where you got to be careful, because even in a brand new property, you could experience some depreciation. Physical, that pretty much only comes along when the property is somehow worn out, whether it's 10 years old, 20 years old, 2 years old, there's probably some sort of physical. If it just needs new paint, if the lawn needs to be mowed, that's your physical stuff. It could be something more major like the roof or something along those lines. But typically, these are the things that can be fixed, and you usually see a little bit of a bump in value when you kind of cure these physical depreciations. Functional, on the other hand, functional is going to take a lot more work. And I don't know if anyone's ever watching this replaced windows before. And if you have, I'd love to hear what you guys paid to replace these windows. Even if you're putting in single pane windows, these things cost a fortune. And if we're going to talk about double pane, so maybe upgrading this from a functional obsolescence in Florida specifically. We're getting into the hot time of the year. It's only April right now, but April in Florida. And it was just a little bit cooler. It was like 70 degrees last week, but this week got out of my car when I got to the office, and oh my God, I'm like almost sweating. I got a short walk upstairs to get to the office, but that heat is immense. Now I'm thankful here that we have double pane windows, but not every property is built with these double pane windows in them, and they cost a huge amount. But now, while I see that there's a great benefit of having these expensive windows, I wouldn't spend money to put these windows in. These double pane windows were here when we got here, and I'm thankful for that. Because if the property doesn't have them, I'm like, not even worth it. Because this might cost $20,000, $30,000 to update these windows. But we might only get a little bump. Because with something like this, even me that's lived in Florida, that's not going to be a deal breaker for me if I'm looking at properties. It's not a deal breaker, the type of windows. It's not the best thing if there's cheap windows in there, but it's not going to be a deal breaker. And for something like that, that's where we would call this incurable. So an incurable depreciation is going to be where you're going to spend more money than you're going to be able to get back in value. So when you spend $20,000 putting in new windows, but maybe you're only going to get an extra $5,000 when you sell it, if anything. But that's the key thing with an incurable depreciation. Curability, as far as depreciation goes, it's not like with human lives where we'll go to spend all cost to cure some sort of disease or whatever it may be. Bad windows are like a disease for a property. And if we're going to cure those windows, it's going to cost more than we're going to get out of it. So that's why I would call this incurable, because it's not cost effective. This is very similar to the term over improvement. And these are hot topics to talk about when you're talking with sellers or people that are thinking about selling their home, and a great way to prospect with people that maybe aren't ready to sell their home now, but they're maybe thinking about it within the next year or two. They're thinking about maybe selling their home. One of the great ways to go about prospecting is, hey, contact me. I'll make sure if you're going to do anything on your house, if you're even remotely thinking about selling it someday, talk to me about any sort of improvements you want to do, and I'll tell you what kind of value you could expect to get out of the property, so you could really determine whether or not it's worth it for what you'd be spending on, say, these windows. Or let's say that you want to, and this is a big one, so kind of changing gears out of the depreciation here with the over improvements, a swimming pool. So a swimming pool, even if you're putting in a really cheap pool, that's going to be $25,000, $30,000 to put in some sort of swimming pool. But the value you're going to get out of that, anywhere maybe from $10,000, $15,000. If it's a really nice property, you might be able to get $20,000 out of it. But then you usually have to have an equally nice pool that's maybe costing you $50,000, $60,000. So when you got to have the little waterfalls in there and the slides and the little jets of water that stream up, it might be a beautiful pool. And it might help the property sell quickly, but it's not going to increase proportional to how much you spent for that item. That's what we would call an over improvement. Now, the incurable depreciation, it's very similar to the over improvement, because essentially with an incurable depreciation, we're spending money to fix something, but we're not going to get the value out of it. So the key difference is here, we're just making an improvement to the property for an over improvement, and we're not getting our money back. An incurable depreciation, we're trying to cure depreciation, but we're spending more money curing it than we're going to get back in value from the property. So that would be an incurable depreciation. Now your physical stuff, this is typically curable. And curable is what we call it when it can be fixed. So when we can spend, let's say, $1,000 and we get $5,000 in return. So maybe and just to kind of again tie this back into some real world stuff here, the two things, especially in residential housing, that usually stands out the most to people. So number one is curb appeal. Curb appeal is one of the first things, and it's usually a requirement by most MLSs to have the front of the property displayed first. So that's super important, because when the MLS pushes these properties out to all of these online portals on Zillow and Truly on Realtor.com and all this other stuff, the first picture is what they're going to see. And I bet you've judged some properties based on what you see when you drive by it. Or if you're flipping through listings online, you've judged it. You might not even decided to look at any additional pictures. There's so many properties available and so many options. If you've got a bad first picture, if you've got a bad first impression, that's the curb appeal. That's going to maybe eliminate your property as a choice. So the curb appeal is definitely one of the first things I would recommend to make sure is in good shape. And with the curb appeal, this could just be something as easy as maybe painting the property. So maybe painting the property, that's going to be great for it. Making sure the lawn is mowed, maybe putting new mulch or something like that down. Mulch is usually the go-to. You could maybe do these rocks and everything like that. I know we're getting kind of into the exterior design side of things here, but that's kind of the fun part of real estate. You get to play designer, and especially if you're advising sellers on what they should do to kind of help maximize the value and maximize the money that they're putting in their property. Mulch, super inexpensive, and it looks great. And when it doesn't look great, you just put more mulch right on top of it. It's nice like that. Usually, eventually, you'll have to go in there and kind of rake some of it out maybe and get some of the nasty stuff out. But you just pour the new mulch on, and it's going to look great. It's going to smell nice and fresh. So that's something there. Maybe resodding the lawn. That could be something that could maybe cost, depending on the side of the yard we're dealing with here, this could be maybe $1,000, maybe $2,000, a couple thousand maybe, but that's going to be immense, because that's going to be the difference of somebody seeing the property and just seeing this first picture and wanting to see more, or just seeing this first picture and then saying, nah. But the key thing is here, there's only so much value you're going to be able to get out of this. And this is why you as a professional, you need to be an expert of talking about over improvements, about incurable depreciations, because these are huge mistakes that home sellers get. They get them locked in their home. If somebody goes and spends $50,000 on a pool, and they just spent $50,000 on their pool 2 years ago, they're going to be upset when they go to sell their house and you tell them, oh, well, no, that's not worth $50,000. So these are and they're so proud of these pools and so proud of whatever improvements it is. They have to be proud of it when they're spending these immense amounts of dollars on that. So this is where it's a great opportunity for realtors to prospect, to truly serve your potential clients and give them some great advice. Be like, hey, that looks like a great pool, but now how long are you guys planning on staying here? Because maybe they do plan on staying there for 10 years, and maybe that's going to be a good investment for them because they'll get their money's worth out of it, out of the enjoyment they're going to have. But if they're thinking of selling within a year, 2 years maybe, that's where you say, hey, look, I know you really want to do this nice pool here, but just know if you do this, we're not going to be able to recoup as much value if and when you do decide to sell the property. So that's where you really want to talk about things about curb appeal type of stuff. Now, you don't want to get too crazy. You don't too elaborate. You don't need to be putting in like huge waterfalls and water fountains and water features in the front of the property and whatnot, but just some basic stuff. And especially right before the property goes actually listed, when they're thinking about listing the property, that's where you can make these little quick changes. Get a company out there. Maybe the homeowners want to do it themselves where they resawed the lawn. And that's usually going to be great. Now, it might not even need that. So we got to determine whether or not it is something that's going to make it look a lot better. But if it's all patchy and everything like that, no one wants a patchy lawn. When they're buying their house, they envision the house with a nice green lawn. So get a professional out there, or if they're comfortable doing it themselves, they want to save some money, they'll get a better return on their investment. But it's usually good to have a professional come out there, good to have some people you could recommend. So the curb appeal is definitely one of the first things. Now, the second and third things, these are really kind of a tie. Really kind of a toss-up because it does depend on the homeowner, the potential homeowner that you're presenting this to, the potential buyer you're presenting this to. But one of the two things, and I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to go with this one for number 2, but that's because I like to cook myself. So the kitchen. So the kitchen, and I'll go ahead and put number 3 up here. Now, these two could really go either way. And you don't want to get too carried away, because with kitchens, and also the third is going to be bathrooms, particularly the master bathroom. These could really go either way. Typically, the kitchen, I would say, is going to get you a better return on your investment when you're making some sort of improvements than a bathroom would. Because with the kitchen, not only is this a place where people do spend quite a bit of time in it, I mean, you think breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I mean, even if they're there for just one meal out of the day, that's probably an hour they're spending in and around this kitchen. I mean, whenever they want a snack, they're going to the kitchen. When they have friends and family over, the kitchen is typically a gathering place where foods are being served and whatnot. So the kitchen is going to be huge. And that's usually a focal point. Not everyone's going to go see the master bathroom. Yeah, if you're giving them the grand tour of the property, some people might go through and say, oh, wow, you have such a lovely bathroom. And people like nice bathrooms. But That's why, like I said, the kitchen, I think, is going to give you a better return on your investment. But the key thing is you got to be careful with the money that you're spending with this stuff here. And if you're trying to find out how this affects your particular market, because every neighborhood's different. Every neighborhood's different. And the higher end you get, the more value you get, the higher up in the price that you go, the more this is going to make a difference. Because you've probably seen some elaborate kitchens on it, whether it's on HGTV or you've seen some listings where they have these fantastic kitchens. But typically, you could get a pretty good value out of it as long as you spend the money smart. It's maybe $10,000, $15,000. I mean, it depends, and it could be lower than that if we're dealing with a property that's a little maybe below average, or it could be a little bit more than that if we're dealing with an above average property. But that's something you could maybe expect to get out of this. The curb appeal, this is probably your number one return on investment. The highest ROI is going to come from your curb appeal. Now, if it already has curb appeal, then there's nothing you need to do. And that, again, you don't want to over-improve any of these items. If they are depreciated, if there's a depreciation, so let's say the kitchen's too small. That would be a functional obsolescence. So the kitchen being too small is a functional obsolescence. That's going to take quite some bit of money, even if it's just maybe as simple as just moving back a wall or taking out a wall or something like that. That's a functional obsolescence, and that would probably be incurable. And this is where you got to understand the budget behind these things. And again, if the homeowner's planning on staying there forever, then let them spend whatever money that is that they want. But if they're planning on selling it, that's a great opportunity for you to be a prospect, or to prospect with them and basically talk to them and say, hey, look, I know you're thinking about updating the kitchen. You want to walk me through some of the things you're doing just to make sure we're going to get a good return on our investment. I could kind of maybe tell you some things, give you some pointers to help us really get the property sold fast when you are ready. And that's where they kind of start to describe these things to you. And the more elaborate it gets, it's like, hey, look, this is going to be great. It's definitely going to help us sell the property quicker. Because with any one of these things that you're doing, whether it's curb appeal, kitchen, the bathrooms, or putting in crown molding everywhere, or changing out the floors everywhere, or whatever it is that you're doing, it's definitely going to make the property sell faster, but at the appropriate price. And usually, a lot of these improvements, especially when you get into the fancy, like imported teak floors, or even the porcelain tiles, I mean, they could get pretty pricey once you factor in the installation and everything like that. So yes, it will help the property sell faster, but now this is where we're weighing that opportunity cost, basically, of the money it is that they're investing in the property and whether or not they're gonna be okay with the minimized returns that you're getting out of it. So that's gonna be incurable whenever we're spending more money than we're getting out, or an over-improvement if it's just basically something that we're improving that was never really a depreciation to begin with here. But the physical stuff, this is the stuff almost all the time, the physical stuff you want to get fixed. So paint jobs, that's something you definitely want to get done because that's going to make a huge difference. Even if it's just a matter of kind of cleaning some stuff up, that's going to be physical. If maybe something's got like a little corrosion on it, maybe getting that cleaned up, the lime, calcium, and rust type of spray and whatnot. It's amazing what these chemicals can do, probably how terrible they are for you, but amazing what they can do to make stuff look like brand new. So not everything necessarily needs to be replaced, but you want to try to get all these physical things taken care of because these are curable. Like I said, a new lawn, maybe not the backyard, but at least the front yard, getting some new mulch in there, some stuff like that, fresh coat of paint, making sure everything's nice and clean and dusted and everything. That's all your physical depreciations, which are very easy to fix. There can be larger physical depreciations, the roofs and the things like that, but again, you got to weigh the pros and the cons. Okay, if I spend this much money, how much money am I going to get out of it? And that's where you as the real estate professional come in to give them some good advice. And this is how you start forming the relationship before they're even ready to sell. Because if you're trying to start a relationship when they're ready to sell, it's a lot more difficult because they see, hey, look, you're here to earn a commission off of me. And most people are understanding with that, but it's harder to build the relationship when you have that there. When you're helping people out months, years in advance, that's where they're like, whoa, I know you're going to try to earn commission someday, but I've never had a realtor help me out this much. You're truly a friend. And when they think of you as a friend, you've got that relationship locked down very easily now to get a contract when they're ready and when it's appropriate to them. Now, when we get back after this next break, we're going to talk more about depreciation. We're going to get into the third type of depreciation, so stick with us. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Ask the Instructor. When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. Need help preparing for your exam? We've got you covered. Join us for a structured weekend review class where we'll cover the topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams. Class sizes are limited, so reserve your seat now by calling 813-928-0106 or registering online at tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Have you been thinking about starting a real estate career, but are struggling to find the time to go back to school? Allow us to introduce our revolutionary online course platform. At the Tampa School of Real Estate, we have used our years of education experience and student feedback to bring you the finest and best online course. Visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, or call us at 813-928-0106, that's 813-928-0106 to learn more and register for our online course today. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career. Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching. Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. Every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, we come to you to help you understand the real estate industry, as well as learn about some topics that'll help you pass your Florida real estate license exam. And if you're looking for something a little bit more geared and structured to helping you prepare and study for the exam, these videos are great, but if you really want to hone in on what it is that you need to know, go to tampaschoolofrealestate.com. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, or call us at 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. We have stuff to help you out at every step of the way, so give us a call. We'd love to hear from you, and hopefully you guys are enjoying this show today. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Ryan Owens, your comment there, so thanks so much. If you guys have questions on any of this stuff as well, I'm live in the moment right here, so put your stuff on Facebook, on the YouTube chat, whatever it is, send it in to us. You can text into us. I probably won't see that right here on the show and might not be able to get to it here, but that feedback still gets to me. So thank you guys for tuning in, but let's get back to the depreciation. So before we went on the first break, we were talking about depreciation in general. It's a loss of value. We have your physical stuff, which this is your normal wear and tear. Worn out walls, needing paint, lawns that need to be replaced, just things needing to be cleaned. That's all physical depreciation. Physical losses of value that are very easy to cure. So we could spend a little bit of money and get a greater amount of money in return. We then have the functional obsolescences, the functional depreciations. And this is maybe like a kitchen being too small, which you can fix that, but you're probably not going to get money out of it. Windows. We were talking about the non-energy efficient windows, so the single pane windows versus a double or triple pane windows. Windows cost a fortune. I don't know what it is about windows, because I don't think the glass itself is that expensive. Maybe they just have a huge markup, but whatever it may be, the windows, you typically can't recoup that investment. Now, if it's a broken window and you're just replacing the glass, that would be our physical obsolescence. So if it's a broken window, yes, fix a broken window. If it's got a crack in it or something like that, that's probably going to be where you're going to get a return on the value, because that's maybe going to cost you a couple $100s to fix a broken window. But replacing the windows, even if you're just doing it on the side, like the south side of the house, or some side of the house that gets more sun than usual, that's still probably going to be more money than you're going to be able to recoup out of that. Because honestly, when people are touring the house, they may, if they have double pane windows themselves, they may notice that, but that's not something they're going to be willing really to pay that much money extra for. They might kick up the price a little bit, but I guarantee it's not going to be what the cost of those fancy windows were for. So that's one example of our functional obsolescences. We have the small kitchens. Maybe it's a bad layout if the kitchen's on one side of the house and the dining room's on another. Yeah, it might be a little bit easier to try to get that dining room a little bit closer, but overall that's just poor layout of the property. That's a functional obsolescence, and functional obsolescences are typically incurable. Incurable means that you're going to spend more money then you're going to be able to recoup back out of it. So that'd be an incurable depreciation. Incurable depreciations are very similar to an over-improvement. You've probably heard that term before of an over-improvement, and the over-improvements are going to be where you're maybe putting in a swimming pool or maybe putting addition onto the property. You're not fixing anything that's wrong. That's the difference between an over-improvement and these depreciations, because the over-improvement, there was nothing wrong in the first place. You're just over-improving the property. You're improving the property more than you're going to be able to recoup out of it. So a swimming pool is a great example of that. An addition on a property is another example of that. You got to keep in mind with all this stuff, and that's where the principle of substitution comes into play. The principle of substitution says if there's a similar house down the street from yours, from the property you're trying to figure out the value for, that's pretty much going to set the higher end of the value, where you can't really go too much above that. Maybe you get a little bit above that, but that highest price that another property sold for, or that another property is for sale, very easy to substitute your property, and that's kind of what sets the highest price. So that's where we have the over improvements and the incurable depreciations come into play quite a bit. We talked about the three areas that are going to be great for, as long as you're not going overboard, increasing the value of the property, fixing depreciations with the curb appeal. Now again, I'm saying fixing depreciations. I'm not saying make an over improvement. I'm saying if there's something that causes the value to be lost, such as a patchy lawn, that'll help out with curb appeal. New paint, that's curb appeal. The kitchen. Maybe the kitchen is very outdated, but maybe it's just as simple as replacing the cabinet faces. Maybe you're not necessarily even replacing the entire cabinets. Maybe the cabinets are in good shape, but maybe just replacing the faces or the knobs on it or something smaller like that doesn't cost very much but still going to increase the value. Depending on how outdated the kitchen may be, it might warrant a larger expense where you can still recoup that larger amount of money out of it, but you got to be careful with this because this could really add up quickly. We also have the bathroom. So the bathroom, I would say, is usually second to the kitchen, really third out of these three that you want to focus on when you're advising your clients on what would be good ways to kind of spend their money when they're trying to increase the value for it. But with the bathroom, they may see it. You might be doing the grand tour of the property and saying, hey, check this out over here. Look at my bathroom. Isn't this great? Check out the shower with the rainfall head on it and everything like that. But you want to be careful with this. Make the bathroom look nice, make it look up to date, but don't go too crazy and too overboard unless you have a crazy and overboard property, because people are going to pay for overboard for those properties anyway, so that's where you can kind of get away with spending this amount of money. But for most average homes, that's where you're going to really kind of rein these things in and keep it in check. So we have one more type of depreciation. So Josh Smith, comment on Facebook, says, I feel like prices are overpriced and homes are starting to sit on the market longer. So I was having this discussion with somebody the other night about the current state of the market right now, particularly in Tampa. And the market's different everywhere you go in Florida and everywhere you are in the country. Every market kind of acts independently somewhat based on what's going on here. But Tampa's been experiencing quite a bit of rise. And people are asking me, hey, do you think that we're at the top? Or are we going to start going back down? It's hard to say, because when we're exactly at the top, we're definitely on our way to the top if we're not already there. But is it going to continue to go up? It's hard to say. But one of the things I think that's contributing to the higher prices and homes sitting on the market longer are overpricing the listings to begin with. And this is where, again, your knowledge of the market and what's going on, it really kind of, I don't want to say overpowering, but basically making your professional opinion clear that it's a better advice than what the clients typically think. So, and what's going on? So with the market, so the Tampa market has been on the rise. And any market where it's on the rise and people start to take notice that the market's on the rise, people start to let that price go to their head. Even back in 2006, when we were experiencing some of the highest property prices around, not necessarily values, the highest prices around, there were homes that were sitting on the market because they were overpriced. And there's only so much you could sell a property for, even in a crazy market. And so the more that gets to people's heads when they're selling their property, the more it's going to sit on the market. Because if you overprice a property, it doesn't matter how much of this stuff you have fixed in on there and how little depreciation it has. If it's overpriced, if it's priced more than it's actually valued and worth that, not much you could do from the standpoint. Yeah, you could try to kind of make it look as great as you can, but ultimately that's going to cause the property to sit on the market longer, and it's going to, and those two kind of go together. So Is the market going to continue to go up? I think it probably is. We might have some ups and downs. I don't think we're going to have any major crashes anytime soon, at least not with real estate, the stock market and some other kind of markets and whatnot. But real estate, we probably have got some years before we start to see any downturn and whatnot. But hey, I don't have the crystal ball. I've got some ways to kind of make some speculation and whatnot, but you got to pay attention to your particular market as well and pay attention to what's going on, because even at the neighborhood level, you could have neighborhoods that are basically getting stale, turning into a stale type of neighborhood. So the more kind of expertise you could have in a local nature, and that's what makes real estate different than investing in the stock market, investing in Apple or investing in any company that could be publicly traded, is because that's the same company all over the world. Real estate, it's unique down to the neighborhood, down to the street that it's on. So that's where your professional expertise kind of comes into play right here. But ultimately, you want to be the advisor that tells them, hey, look, I really wish we could sell your property like that. We maybe could sell your property for that higher price, but if you want to sell it quickly, if you're not willing to wait for the property to go through, we're not going to be able to sell it for that high of a price quickly. I mean, you pretty much have two things that are opposite. The higher the price is, the longer it's going to take to sell, eventually where you get down to zero, where you can never sell it if that price gets too high. So those are definitely the opposites of each other. So let's talk about our third type of depreciation, because we have our physical, normal wear and tear stuff. We have functional, things that are more major repairs that are due to the materials, the layout of the property, and there's one more, and that's called external. So our external depreciations, our external obsolescences, these are things outside of the property. So when your neighbor has all kinds of crap in their backyard, even if you're in some sort of HOA community and whatnot, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that people could have in their backyard. As long as it looks good from the front, then that's okay. But let's say you're going to the backyard and you look out back, you're like, oh, look at all that crap they've got out there. Or maybe they have overgrown lawns or whatever that may be. Typically, your external obsolescences are going to be incurable, but there's one thing that goes a long way. And yeah, you do want to get something that looks decent, so it does depend on what the property is, but for the external obsolescences, the best thing you could have is a fence. So especially when we're talking about backyards or anything like that, the fence is great. It gives people privacy, even if we're in one of these kind of like clustered together types of neighborhoods where there's lots of homes really like kind of right on top of each other. The fence will greatly help the marketability of the property, because now you don't necessarily, people feel the privacy essentially. Not everyone, rarely anyone wants to have a backyard where you walk into it and you say, oh look, there's the neighbors, hi. And that makes them feel like this is not a private place. If they don't care about privacy, they're not going to want any sort of yards. Maybe they're looking at condos or something like that. And high-rise condos probably going to have more privacy than a backyard with no fence around it. So the fence is great. Now these could get expensive, especially these fancy like PVC vinyl fences and whatnot. And you got to pay attention to the situation. So if the neighbors are nice, they keep everything well kept and everything looks okay and they look like good neighbors, I wouldn't recommend any sort of fence or anything like that. But if they're like, oh my God, we can't let people see that's where you have to have the fence, just to kind of maybe give that little bit of privacy as well, because it's going to help out in all cases, in all situations where people would want some privacy, having the fence there. But the question of, are you going to get the return in value out of it? Is it going to help people from not seeing the craziness that goes on next door where there's people skinny dipping and whatnot? So the fence is great. It gives you privacy. It helps kind of give you this sense that this is my yard. So the fence is really the only thing you can do, though, for the external obsolescences. And there can be a lot of them, which, I mean, even if we're living on a great property, say we have a golf course property, you want to know what the external obsolescence is? The golf course. So the golf course does increase the value as opposed to a property that's maybe not on a golf course, but it also decreases the value because, hey, that privacy stuff that we're talking about, we don't have any of that with a property that's on a golf course. In addition to that, you got all these golf balls that are going to be coming at your house. So all kinds of stuff like that, maybe it might be something cool, especially if they like golf. But with the external obsolescence, getting to know your client and what it is that they're looking for, as a good buyer's agent, you can kind of maybe help to avoid some of these external obsolescences, even if it's like some sort of waterfront property. If it's on a beach, The beaches typically aren't private, and even if they are private, they're not private to where they have fences running down them. Usually people could still be walking by, which they might not like that. So that could be something as well. And like I said, getting to know your client is really going to help you out with that. But the external stuff, there's really not too much you could do in the lines of that. Now, before we get into actually calculating this, I want to take one more question here. We got from Josh Smith. How's the supply in Tampa? I'm in West Palm Beach. So, hello to West Palm Beach and the entire east coast of Florida. Kind of funny how it's called West Palm Beach, right? Is it West Palm Beach? It's somewhere in Florida, wherever it is that you are. I'll have to look at a map after this. I think it's on the East Coast, isn't it? I'm thinking it in my head, but why would they call it West Palm Beach if it's on the East Coast? I don't know. I'm going to have to find out. Maybe you could clear that up for me, Josh. So supply in Tampa, especially, so in Tampa's such an interesting market. We have areas like South Tampa where we're basically recycling the supply at this point. In South Tampa, there's very little land. There's a few developments going in here and there, but a lot of the supply is basically being recycled. They're taking the older homes and kind of tearing them down, assembling some lots together and building larger houses on top of that. And the Tampa market has really transgressed over the years from where these homes with the kind of minimal value, and the value's gotten to the point where these smaller homes paying that price, people don't really see the worth in it. So you see a lot of recycling going with that in the more central areas to Tampa. You get more outside of Tampa, you start looking at and still kind of the Tampa Bay area, like the Wesley Chapel, Fishhawk area, Riverview, these kind of suburbs of Tampa, and there right now they have a huge amounts of land, and there's lots of new construction going on out there. So it's really neat to kind of look at this stuff and to kind of see the differences. And with these areas, these more suburban areas, there's so much land available. Yes, you're going to still pay a good amount for the property, but the land is a lot cheaper in these more suburban type of areas because there's so much of it available. You look at the South Tampa and more central to Tampa where there's really no land left, and you got to buy a property that already has a house on it just to get some land to actually build something on, and that really kind of okay, yeah, so he says it's the East Coast. All right, so I'm not crazy. West Palm Beach is on the East Coast, so anyways, I digress. But yeah, the Tampa market, I love it because it's really interesting. And with a short drive, maybe driving not even a half hour, you go from one market to an entirely different type of market. And there's actually something pretty neat going on out in the Wesley Chapel area, or not Wesley, I think it's Dade City they're doing it in. But they're building one of these like massive lagoons. And I don't know if someone's beating them to it, because I think there's a couple of these that are being developed in the U.S. right now. But one of those great big, I think it's like 50 acres of a man-made lagoon, basically, and it's all kind of like purified, chlorinated type of water and whatnot. But I mean, you could go out there and like ride like jet skis and do like the little like kite surfing and whatnot. So that's pretty neat, and that's going on in the outskirts of Tampa. And there's so much development going on. It's really neat to see, and everything that's going on with Tampa with and with this, my point of all this stuff is, because I know we've got people that are watching not in Tampa, but know your market, know what's going on in the market, know about these news stories, about the news developments, about the companies that are relocating to the area, whether it is that you want to advise your clients or you just want to understand the market for yourself, or maybe you're working with investors. When you have this inside localized type of information, I mean, Josh, he's over here in West Palm Beach. That's a couple hours from Tampa. But I mean, it's hard to understand what's really going in Tampa without actually being here, and that's why this real estate industry is what it is, because you need this local expertise, and people are willing to pay for that. But let's talk about some calculations on this depreciation stuff. And now this is kind of more so the theoretical side of kind of understanding how depreciation really occurs. Let's talk about the Irs Depreciation Deduction. So if you have an investment property, because basically it's a very similar type of calculation for your non-deduction, where you're just trying to figure out the depreciation for a property using the straight line method. So with investment property, the IRS allows you to depreciate the value of the property. And this is a significant advantage of investing in real estate. You can't do this with your principal residence. So if you go to buy a home, you're not actually going to be able to get any of this depreciation deduction. You can't get a capital loss. So you're really limited in the principal residence. There are great tax benefits, but not as many tax benefits as it is to invest in property. And just again, tying back in the market knowledge that's going on right now, and Tampa, again, just to reference this stuff, there's tons of apartment buildings going on. So this same stuff that I'm telling you guys right now is being validated by the apartment buildings and apartment complexes that are being built in the Tampa area right now. We are at the peak of the rental market. I don't want to say the peak of the rental market because it could go up higher, but we're at an all-time high for rentals, percentage of rentals as opposed to percentage of ownership. So it's a huge opportunity right now, even with higher prices. You could make a good deal at any time, whether the market is up or the market is down. You could make a good deal as long as you know what the market is and you're being smart about the way that you're spending money with this. And it gets a lot more detailed than that and a lot more microized than that. But really, you could get a good deal regardless of what the state of the market may be. So for the Irs Depreciation Deduction, they say basically, based on the type of property you have, whether it's residential or non-residential. So either residential or non-residential property. If it's a residential property, the IRS says it should last about 27 and a half years. So based on the property lasting approximately 27 and a half years is what the IRS uses to determine the depreciation that you get off the building. Now, the land doesn't depreciate in the value. They don't allow you to deduct a depreciation for the land because land isn't considered to depreciate in value. Yes, the value of the land may go up and down, but that's due to the market. That's not due to depreciation. So for residential property, they expect it to last 27 and a half years. Non-residential property, whether it's an office building or whatever it may be, they expect to last 39 years. And if you're taking your exam, these are definitely two numbers that you want to know. And basically, this is the lifespan of the property. They call it the useful life. So the useful life by the IRS is 27 and a half years for residential, 39 years for non-residential. Now, this is for tax purposes. These are the number of years that you would use. If you're trying to figure out the depreciation of a property based on whether it costs this much new and how much depreciation it is, you're actually doing an appraisal or a CMA or a BPO or whatever it may be, you might use different numbers than this. You probably will use different numbers than this where these are longer, maybe 40 or 50 years of a lifespan, or maybe 80 or 100 years for lifespan. It depends on the construction of the property. So this is just for tax purposes, the numbers that you would use here, but these are definitely numbers you want to know for the exam. So what this means, let's say we have a property where let's say the property value is $1 million. So we have $1 million worth of value, $1 million of value of the entire property. Now, to do depreciation, whether it's depreciation for tax purposes or you're doing it for evaluation of the property, you never depreciate the land. So what you need to do basically is make a determination of the land value. This could be done by a percentage. You could use a comparable sales to figure out the value of the land, but you need to deduct the value of the land. And let's say we determine the value of the land to be about $200,000, about 20% of the property. So we're going to subtract out our land value. So this is our entire property value, this is our land value, and then what we're left with is our building value of $800,000. So $800,000 would be the value of our building. The IRS, they use a term for this, they call it the depreciable basis. The depreciable basis, meaning the basis amount that's depreciable. It's really just a fancy way of saying the building value, the IRS way of saying the building value. The IRS has got to complicate everything, including saying building value. They have to call it depreciable basis. So in case you ever see that term, we're talking just about the building value. Now, depending on whether this is how much, and this gets recalculated every year. And this, again, is a little bit more the basic theory. It's a little bit of a simplification than this here. You want to always talk to your accountant and this stuff. I never recommend doing your taxes on your own. I tried doing that before, and I had a real accountant look at it, and I got a lot more money back afterwards. But I always recommend using an actual accountant. Don't try to do it yourself. Even if you don't really make that much money, still have a professional accountant because they'll make sure they can kind of maximize your deductions and whatnot for you and make sure you're getting everything that you can. But basically, this is a complicated topic. The IRS code is like 70, I think it's up to 80,000 pages long now. 80,000 pages. They're not writing in big font. It's a little tiny font, 80,000 pages. So it's a lot of stuff to know, even if you are a tax professional and this is your job. I digress. So if this is going to be a residential property, it's going to be 27 and a half years. So it's expected to last 27.5 years. So if we do some quick math here and just basically kind of divide this out, we take our 800,000, we divide this by 27.5, and we're going to get a depreciation deduction. So this is a deduction of your income on your taxes of $29,090 and about 91 cents. So that's how much deduction we get if this is a residential piece of property. Now the key thing with this is that it has to be an investment property. This can't be your principal residence, because they only allow a depreciation deduction on investment property. They do not allow it for your principal residence. So that's why there's the argument about whether or not it is that you should buy a home. And as an investor, it's a great time to buy homes, but just not for yourself, for other people, for them to rent out. And if you bought a property that's $1 million, and I'm not talking about just a single family home, if you got $1 million to invest, you probably want to get into some sort of multi-unit type of property. And with that, let's say the building value was just $800,000. That's $29,000 a year that you get as a depreciation deduction. So that means if you had income of the property, if the property generated $29,090.91 worth of income, you'd have this depreciation deduction to offset that. Your income would be zero. If you had $30,000 worth of income on the property, of net income after your allowed expenses, that would be $900 or so, $910, about $909 that you'd have of taxable income. So this depreciation deduction is huge. Now, when you're investing in real estate, you got to make sure you're investing in the right vehicle, because if you try to do a real estate investment trust, the real estate investment trust is going to be able to get this depreciation deduction, but they've got all these management fees and everything like that, and then buying and selling the property. So it's maybe a good way to kind of play around with investing in real estate. But if you want to reap the benefits, a $30,000 benefit, and that's huge. And what this means is, you get this every year. This gets recalculated until the value gets down to zero. It doesn't run out after 27 and a half years. You continue to get this depreciation deduction. And there's so many tax advantages to investing in real estate. You might say, okay, well, John, what about when I go to sell this property? Do I have to pay taxes on it? So you may, if there's a capital gain on the property, you're going to be obligated to pay capital gains taxes. But there's something called a 1031 exchange, or a like-kind exchange. 1031 is the IRS section of the code that talks about this. It's called a 1031 exchange. And what you could do is you could take the gain on the property. It needs to be held by a qualified intermediary that's registered with the IRS to basically do these 1031 exchanges. So they take the money, and then you have to reinvest that money in some sort of property or business or some sort of other investment within a certain time frame. And if you do that, you don't have to pay capital gains taxes. You're deferring those until you eventually sell the property and you don't reinvest it. And then you will have to pay capital gains taxes on that and whatnot. But that's just another one of these benefits that you get through real estate. But that depreciation deduction is huge. And this math that we're doing, it's called the straight line method, basically, of depreciation. And the straight line method of depreciation means that, so let's imagine this chart here. So we've got our high dollar value here, low dollar value here, year 0 here, let's say year 50 here. Or really, let's use the IRS numbers. Let's say this is going to be 27 and a half years. And this is the theory of it. Again, I want to stress the point that this depreciation deduction doesn't run out after 27 and a half years. You could get this. I mean, you might not want to own the property for 27 and a half years, but it's nice to know that you have that benefit and you're not using up any of the new owner's benefits. So when you go to sell that, they'll be able to reap this full depreciation deduction benefit as well, based on whatever the current value is. But the theory of this depreciation straight line method is that here's the value here. It goes down a straight amount every year. So we have every single year, it's going down by the same amount, all the way down to when you get to 27 and a half years, our value is going to be zero. But that's just the theory of this straight line method. The IRS says, yes, in theory it's going to get down to zero, but they just predict it's going to be 27 and a half years. But if you're doing stuff to prolong the usage of the property, to make the property last longer, it's going to last a lot longer than 27 and a half years. You really got to beat up a property to make it not last more than 27, 28 years. So you really got to beat it up to only make it last that long. But I mean, even if you are beating it up, if you're repairing what it is that you're doing, you're going to get that depreciation deduction. And what this is great is there doesn't even have to be any depreciation of the building. You just automatically get this depreciation deduction every single year. So it's huge for an investing in real estate because, again, you can't use this for your principal residence. Now let's say, let's talk about the other way to kind of use this depreciation number. Let's say that we're going to use this for a particular property. We're just trying to find the value of the property, basically. Let's say we could build a building brand new on a home, whatever the actual building part of it is, for, let's say, about $250,000. So we'll say $250,000. That's going to be our building value. But that's if we build the home brand new. Let's say the home, and now this is where you got to look for a number. And you usually find this in your tax records, or you could make a judgment on this based on you figuring out the value of the property if you're qualified to do so. If not, call us up so we could get you qualified to do so. But basically what you do is determine what's called an effective age. And the effective age is how old the property seems to be. So let's say the effective age on this property is 10 years. So the property seems like it's 10 years old. Now there's also actual age. So, and this is different than the effective age. It could be exactly the same, but if they've kept it up in good shape, if they've kept up this property in good shape, this property might have an actual age. It might really be 20 years old. So this property may be 20 years old, but if it's kept up in good shape, it's going to have an effective age of just 10 years, or whatever it is you determine it to be. Let's say the effective age is 5 years. So if the effective age is 5 years, or the actual effective age is 10 years and the actual age is 5 years, that means they haven't kept the property up in good shape. The property is really 5 years old, but effectively it's 10 years old. So that's where our effective age and our actual age come into play here. But really, we don't need to even know what the actual age is. We don't even need to know when the property's built. We just need to know how old it seems to be. And then we're going to have another number, our life of the property. So the lifespan of the property, we don't have to use those IRS numbers when we're trying to figure out the value of the property based on the cost to build it brand new. We could use whatever number we think the property is expected to last. And this is going to vary based on the type of construction. If it's a wood frame, it's generally going to be a little bit lower than a block type of construction. But let's say we use about 50 years for the life of our property. So we've used 10 years, effective 10 years. It doesn't matter the actual age, it matters the effective age. And basically what we have here, we can just do 10 divided by 50, and you're going to end up getting 20%. So what this means is these 10 years represent 20% of the 50-year lifespan of the property. So if the property is expected to last 50 years and we've already used effectively 10 years, that means we've used up 20% of the property value. Which would mean, again, if we have kind of like a little pie chart where 20% is how much is used up, that means 80% is left. So we have 80% of the life left. And depending on whether we want to find out what the value of the property is after depreciation, then we'd use this 80% number. If we want to find out the dollar amount of depreciation, we multiply it by the 20% number. And both of those numbers together are going to add up to this $250,000 here. So let's see, what would 20% be? That'd be $50,000 on this. So we'd have $50,000 worth of depreciation on this property. 20% of $250,000. So $50,000 would be how much depreciation we'd experienced. And then the 80%, the remaining life of the property, the value, the depreciated value, would be $200,000. So if the property were brand new, the building were brand new, because again, we're not dealing with the land, it's just the building here. If the building were brand new, it would sell for $250,000, or would cost $250,000 to build. So if we've used up 10 out of the 50 years, effectively, because really if we're going by the actual age, we used up more time than that, but if the property's been kept up in good shape, that's where our effective age number is lower. And now how do you come up with these numbers? Like I said, you can kind of base some of this stuff off of the tax records the tax assessor goes through, and you can usually find a lot of this information online. A great resource if you don't have access to the MLS is hillstax.org if you're in Hillsborough County, and pretty much every county has some sort of equivalent type of system to that where you could research this all online. You could find some of these numbers already. They may or may not be accurate, and that's where maybe you have to use your professional judgment to kind of maybe tweak this a little bit. But they're good basis points to kind of go off of here. So on this property that's $250,000 for the building, $200,000 of that building would be our depreciated value, and we've lost $50,000 due to depreciation. And you can see how this kind of goes against the other stuff we were talking about at the beginning of this episode. At the beginning, we're talking about, hey, resod the lawn, repaint some stuff, maybe replace some stuff on the inside, clean some stuff up, and that's going to help us increase the value to the property. But with this is basically just looking at, again, at that straight line method. So assuming that our depreciation happens on a straight line over time rather than based on certain things causing it to increase and decrease on value. But ultimately, the improvements that you have to the property are going to be what affects this actual age versus the effective age. So our effective age is basically how old it seems to be. And if you've made a lot of improvements and kept the property up in good shape, it could be a 100-year-old property but still only have an effective age of 10 years if it's been kept up in phenomenal shape. So that's depreciation. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed today's episode here. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Remember, every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time, we do these Ask the Instructor series. And even if you've already passed your exam, I definitely recommend coming back and rewatching these videos because we talk about this in a lot more in depth, and I try to kind of relate this stuff into the real world stuff as much as possible so you could really help grow your real estate business by being a good real estate professional, because you kind of have to know these things a little bit. Yes, it's dealing with people one side of that and marketing your business and whatnot, but for actually being a real estate agent, that's where this knowledge kind of comes into play here. And it's fun, especially if you're an investor, understanding this type of information. Even if you're not an investor, maybe kind of look at some stuff as if you were an investor, and you'll start to greater understand the real estate industry. It'll kind of give you some fuel to the fire. But at the very least, just tune in every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. We'll cover a bunch of stuff like this, and also tune in on Fridays at 12 noon Eastern Time. We do a show called State of Real Estate, and State of Real Estate is great because this is where we tap into now the marketing side. Today, Ask the Instructor on Wednesdays, we're talking about the technical stuff. State of Real Estate, we're talking about the stuff that's going to help you grow your business. We do get a little technical with that one as well, but more technical about marketing, developing your business, building your client base, following up with past clients, marketing listings. There's tons of episodes you could already go and watch. They're all available on our Success Center. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success, tampaschoolofrealestate.com/success. So go on that page there. You can subscribe to all the updates. You can see all the past episodes. And if you guys do have any questions, if you're watching the recording of this, send them in to us, and we'll try to talk about them next week. But other than that, that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in. You've been watching Ask the Instructor. When you look back on your real estate career, you'll remember the moment you decided to begin this journey. The moment when you finally decided it was time for change. The moment when you decided it was time to take charge. The moment that changed the direction of your life forever. Now is that moment. Need help preparing for your exam? We've got you covered. Join us for a structured weekend review class where we'll cover the topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams. Class sizes are limited, so reserve your seat now by calling 813-928-0106 or registering online at tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Have you been thinking about starting a real estate career but are struggling to find the time to go back to school? Allow us to introduce our revolutionary online course platform. At the Tampa School of Real Estate, we have used our years of education experience and student feedback to bring you the finest and best online course. Visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. That's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, or call us at 813-928-0106. That's 813-928-0106 to learn more and register for our online course today. After the show, be sure to visit tampaschoolofrealestate.com. Again, that's tampaschoolofrealestate.com, where you'll find all the information you need to start your career in real estate. Also, be sure to check out our Success Center, where you'll find helpful tips for building a successful real estate career. Hey, if you liked the show today, be sure to hit like and subscribe and post your comments. Thanks so much for watching.